why don't we just get started? Are we ready to go? Okay. So at the end, we'll give you a chance to, if there's something you want to leave, like a parting comment or something that you'd like to leave with us, we'll do that at the end. But most important for the Seattle Times is education. That is something we hit over and over again. I know you're a former school board member, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But one question that we have is, a dozen years ago, the state Supreme Court ruled that Washington State's education finance system was unconstitutional. Though the legislature poured billions of dollars into education, profound funding inequities still exist. How would you fix this?
Well, it requires strategic planning, and not just to say strategic planning. I think it should be from the bottom up and not the top down. So again, that's my line of effort. I'm a strategist. I've taught strategy. I've done this for universities, for ESDs. This would be a focus on children and the classrooms, and specifically teachers. We need to give teachers back their classrooms to teach the fundamentals of education. We need to start focusing and shifting our focus on educational or academic excellence, if you will. Those fundamentals, when focused on the child, and speaking of the child, every child learns differently. So I'll use myself as an example. I'm a high school dropout. I was raised here in Seattle, Washington. I dropped out of high school in Seattle, Washington. I dare say my grades, I'm saying this to the public on the paper, D's and F's and C's were like A's to me. But my capacity was much higher. I was bored in school. College and higher academia, I excelled, summa cum laude, etc. Assessing and understanding a child's independent educational and academic needs and how they learn. I know we have universal design for learning frameworks, and theorem such as that is applicable and should be utilized. A scientific approach to learning or structured literacy should be utilized. I support that, and that's one of my plans. And so assess the child, every child. And people say, well, that's going to require more money. It's going to require more resources and more time. But when you look at the fact that we're 44% of our budget goes to education, it's our number one ledger item. Is it not worth the return on our investment? Understanding that under Article 9, that's our obligation. It's our paramount responsibility, quote unquote, according to legislation. So I think that is what we must do. Have that strategy that flows from the bottom up that says we're going to assess our child, we're going to understand and resource our teachers to make sure that they have what they need, and that focus is on academic excellence. So we have iReady programs, which are great resources so that our teachers can ensure that they are tracking that child consistently throughout their learning process, through every learning iteration, and then adjust as needed. But if you don't have a strategy for continuous growth and excellence, and if you don't understand how that child learns differently, then we're never going to get what we want to get. And that is not necessarily based on race. But yet there's a lot of outside considerations we must take into place. Boy, I can talk about that.
Well, as you're talking, it makes me think that maybe you're not a supporter of the state's prototypical model, which is like, and you would rather go to a funding model where the needs of the children in each school that attracts more money.
Yes,
is that right?
I am, and thank you for saying that. And again, no disrespect for that which came before, but we must review, and I'm a performance improvement consultant, and I'm a behavioral scientist. So yes, the prototypical model is ineffective. It's broad and not specific, and I'm a fan of specificity. And so you cannot broad brush. Every school is different, let alone every school district is different. A rural school, an inner city school, and an urban, I mean, it's just, there's so many differences, and so we must be able to adjust. So I'm not a fan of the prototypical model of resourcing school districts. And please feel free to drill down and ask me more specific questions, because I don't think we have the necessary resources for schools, and we can't say that we do, because you have schools that are saying we're still underfunded. And I would say in terms of special needs, we still are. I think we should have a teacher and a para. I'm a fan of dual instructor because you're pushing SPED students or special needs students into general education, and there's something that most people don't know. And then you have that one teacher, and so he or she is focusing on that general education student, but yet the special needs of a special needs child are special and they're unique. So let's have that para there. So there's a lot. And when I say a strategic plan, it'll include not only the assessment of every child, it's also going to include the needs of that teacher and that educator, so he or she has what they need to do the job.
So let's go macro a little bit on that. In terms of, so one thing that I find always confounding, and it's existed for more than 20 years, is Washington rates among the highest states of people with college degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Yet our state's own children are much less likely to pursue higher education or certification after they graduate from high school. It's really low. How would you change things or approach that so we're making sure that we're producing children who are well educated and qualified to take the jobs that Washington State?
I like this mentorship, and it starts early. It starts in middle school. So one of the things I say, I started off in East 14th and 86th, East Oakland, California. We didn't have a lot of scientists or doctors or lawyers on that street. We had bars and windows, bars and doors, but some of those amazing veterans from the greatest generation, right? And just following on, those lawns were manicured, those hedges were trimmed, and those houses were painted and upkept, probably from those veterans. But mentorship, so that every child knows that there's a brighter future ahead. We have a lot of families that don't have fathers in houses. We have families that are struggling financially. We have single moms. Children going to school hungry. There's a lot of things, and I don't want to digress, but mentors. Children need to know that what they see from within their walls and outside their walls in their neighborhoods does not determine what the future holds for them, and that is important, because as I run for this office, I'm answering questions about mistakes that I've made in my life, and not to shift blame. I take full accountability for my actions. But I will tell you this: you cannot discount the need of a solid family. We must give children hope early. And I get emotional about these things. Again, no blame. But children must know and see that there's nothing that they cannot achieve if they believe. So let's give them that belief early. Let's bring those role models in. There's so many role models out there. And go back to your communities and let them know and show them what you have done with your life. And let us bring those role models back in to those institutions. I'll stop there because I keep going. I'll keep
Okay, we'll stop you. We'll stop you. So let's talk about opportunities that have come to the fore for children in our state. Washington voters approved the charter school initiative, and some of them are very successful. It's interesting because so many of Washington State's elected leaders don't want them to exist. They don't want them to have resources. I'm wondering, what is your philosophy and approach to charter schools? Should they have as much money as kids in more traditional public schools? And then also, do you support other alternative ways for school, like vouchers and things like that?
Educational service accounts, and I support homeschooling. I support parents having the opportunity to choose the school. A family living at or below the poverty line, I think they should have the same access for high quality education as a wealthy family. That's what I believe. So certainly STEM schools, charter schools, however you name them, at the end of the day, every child deserves a high-quality education. We can say they're our future. Well, of course they are. It's just a fact. So let's remove those barriers.
Okay, so let me break this down a little bit more. On the question of charter schools, would you lift the cap on charter schools and allow more of them to open? And then also, because they are, under law, public schools, do you support more money going to charter schools, like the equivalent of traditional public schools?
If they're meeting the standard.
Okay.
And so, and it's the same thing. At what point in time do we bring accountability to academic performance? And I don't want there to be any thoughts of hidden language beyond the language I'm sharing. I'm for return on investment. I'm literally and realistically for my child goes to school, I want them to have the very best education. I want them to leave with the highest of education based on their capacity, and we all have a high capacity. We just have to access it, and that goes back to what I was saying in the first question.
I appreciate that. And then, so I'm asking some specific questions here. The question of vouchers, you mentioned educational savings accounts. Would you like Washington to go into that area to allow people to use some of their tax money to go to private schools?
Yes, I would. Yes. Absolutely.
And would you call that vouchers?
I don't want to trap myself into saying this because a person can misinterpret it.
Sure.
And so, because that's what people do. They'll say, well, you set this. It's a voucher system, or it's a this system. And that's why I'm not trying to equivocate or spin or hide or anything like that. But I want, again, clearly stated, I want that poor family to have the access to the best education. I want them to be able to take their child and put their child in a private school in their neighborhood. If that school has better performance academically, I want them to have that access. I really do. And I think this is something that we have to have a deeper discussion on. Okay. If it's a charter school and that charter school is performing to a level of academic and educational excellence, then I want them to have that access. And it's not just for impoverished families, but let's just put it out there. Okay. It is those families, those marginalized families, those at-risk families that are not receiving the same as wealthy families who have that choice to take their child to any school that they wish and pay a lot of money to ensure that those children get that education, which often and statistically has a follow-on to higher education. And I think we're seeing that statistically. If I'm right, but if I'm wrong, please correct me all, and let's do it on camera.
Okay, so, and I'm trying to get specific because that's how you have policies. So you would support a discussion, as you said,
yes.
The start of a discussion about using public resources to help people send their kids to private schools.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That is it. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Josh.
I wanted to maybe shift gears here a little bit and talk about the Climate Commitment Act.
Yes.
You've told us that you would vote to end it with the initiative that has been filed and that will go before voters this fall. That will prohibit both the cap and trade or cap and invest system in Washington state and also future carbon taxes, not just the ones that exist now, or the system that exists now. I'm wondering your thoughts about climate change generally, but also how we then fund climate policy without a revenue source and what your climate policy would be generally.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I separate out environment and climate change policy. And you can make the argument, how could you? Because but I can. And I will, and I do. When I say environment, it's our forestry. It's our rivers. It's all those things that our citizens enjoy and that makes Washington State beautiful and enjoyable and a destination and a beautiful place to live. We must preserve and protect that, and there's no equivocation again on that or any doubt, and that is something that I will always support. Climate change is something different and something very controversial. On one hand, we have support for climate change, and America as a nation has some of the strictest emissions and carbon emissions laws and protocols in place and technology to restrict and to control. But yet we have other countries that benefit from our controls and laws, like China and India, that are unrestricted and out of control. And it's almost like you have this neighborhood is restricted and their citizens are bearing the brunt of international law and rules. And these folks are playing ball, and this group is taking the brunt, but these folks are out of control. We have to focus in Washington State on what's best for our citizens. And that's really what I want to clarify. When people are trying to put food on their table and they're going to work and they're trying to hold down a job and they're paying 40 and 50 cents more per gallon for gasoline or for diesel for our growers and for our heavy equipment and the over-the-road drivers, and we say in the Climate Commitment Act that no, we're going to bring forth an exemption for you and for growers, but that the exemption is not working, but now we're going to bring forth a law to say, well, now we're going to give you money back because the exemption didn't work. I have issues with that. What it says is it's not so much me being against something, but me being for the citizens who are feeling the brunt of a law that was not well thought out. And this is not me speaking against Governor Inslee when he said, well, it may only be pennies on the dollar and may even go down, almost quote unquote. It's not me speaking against Governor Inslee. It's just saying that it wasn't thought out. We needed to think through and what would be the implications and the hardships of our citizens. That must be my priority. What is best for Washington's citizens at a time where inflation's out of control and where affordability to live in Washington State is out of control. So that is my priority.
But there are ways of tempering the act, of changing it, making it certainly have less impact on communities that cannot afford it. And why not do that instead of repealing and offering no possibility forward for either a cap and trade or a carbon tax?
So what I would say is, let's do it right. And another way of putting this, instead of saying, let's take what was done, in my opinion, wrong without proper planning, and let's start with a clean slate. Instead of trying to patchwork, let's clean slate, and then let's have that discussion. And let's bring in those stakeholders. Let's have that, instead of rushing it through, let's have a discussion. Here's the good news by that initiative. The citizens are going to have a vote. And that's going to be a tell. That is something that under Article 3 that the governor must understand and respect the voice of citizens. Even if the governor doesn't agree, it's the voice of citizens. That's the job, not just the law. And that is something that people need to understand about me. I'm a constitutionalist. And so that would be my answer to your question is I think we would agree we can adjust. We should have a discussion. But instead of patchworking it, I would say let's just clean slate it and let's just redo something that works for everyone.
But if we're acknowledging that climate policy needs to curb carbon emissions, how can we do that without these mechanisms, including cap and trade, including a carbon tax? How do we bring down our emissions if this initiative passes and permanently bans those as sources of revenue to?
So I would say this, and this goes to one of my, I won't give you a question back because I want to respect your time, but I'll give you a statement back relative directly to with that law. And I've read it and extensively, and again, it's kind of in my wheelhouse because I retired from the United States Department of Energy. So I think it's applicable. And although we were on a remediation mission, I'm still somewhat studied, and I never want to act like I know what I don't know. So I stay humble in my knowledge. Energy. Right now, our energy infrastructure is wholly incapable of sustaining the needs of our state currently, let alone pulling back and readjusting on natural gas, etc. And I know so much of this has become political, and it shouldn't be. Again, as folks get to know me, much of what I would propose is politics aside. Boy, I could say so much about politics that should be aside, all aside, and you can read into that, and focus on performance. Our electrical grid is broke. It's a fledgling system. Our substation. Right now, if we went full capacity and on all of our hydroelectric capabilities, our system is hurting. And you saw that, for example, when we had that cold snap, and Puget Sound Energy was sending out text messages saying, ease up on your usage, because again, we were having a little brownout activity. It's our substation capacity. The reason I say this, I was a special forces engineer, and one of the things that we go through in training, advanced training, is that we learn about our ports, we learn about our infrastructure, nuclear, hydro, dams, port systems. I'm also a demolitions expert, so we have to learn how they're constructed and how they operate so that we learn how to incapacitate them. So I know how our infrastructure systems operate. Transformers, substations. That is why we have those issues, because they cannot sustain or withstand the power coming to them. I hope I made sense without going too geek.
Well, I think my next question is around the Washington State ferry system, and,
yes.
and maybe this is applicable here
Yes.
To this conversation about emissions. So the governor at present, Governor Inslee, has essentially is pushing our state towards the direction of going towards hybrid electric, eventually electric, for ferries, reducing those emissions of the Washington State ferries. Your plan, you've said, no, we're not going to do hybrid electric. You want to pay for 6 diesel vessels. And I'm wondering, then, are you saying we completely abandon hybrid electrics? And maybe, again, this is a good example of just what we would expect from you as governor with regard to that carbon emissions are not as a high a priority as the man who currently sits in the governor's mansion.
That's one way of saying it, but I wouldn't say that would be accurate. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to it. We have a need right now. So I think we have, 15 out of 21 vessels currently operating, and there's a lot to pack in with everything. But I think it's factually accurate. And our system is fledgling right now based on the need, again, of our commuters. In order to legitimately get our fleet up to where it needs to be, that is the right answer, to bring those. And then taxpayers, everyone pays tax at all socioeconomic levels. Everyone pays tax, and we talk about affordability of living in Washington State, and then the people on this side of the mountains, wow, but all sides of the mountains. So I think when you look at it this way, more economic, more practical, more cost-effective, that is why I'm bringing my plan to bear. We can make that happen quicker, more cost-efficient with the newer technology that we have available in marine diesel. It's not producing, it's not like the old days where it's like puff, puff. It's not like that. But having that discussion for a future fleet as we become more prosperous, because there is so much. I'm a long-term thinker, deep thinker, strategic thinker, where I will lay out a long-term plan, not only from energy independence, but towards lowering our carbon emissions. I am all for that discussion, and I'm looking forward to participating in it. But we must, again, focus on what is best for our citizens of Washington State, where we have a budget that's out of control right now. I mean, again, our administration, with respect to them and our governor, the budget's doubled. We're at $72.5 billion with that extra $2 billion that was added. At what point in time are we going to say, whoa, and for those taxpayers, we're trying to price seniors out of their homes. And then our young people can't even afford homes. That money is coming from somewhere, and we can't. We're not like the federal government. We can print money and then raise the debt ceiling. So and then the people who are commuting and the businesses that rely on the ferry system. I think my plan is realistic and most beneficial to the people who we serve. But boy, I will have that discussion on reducing our carbon emissions. And I do have a plan for that. No one has asked yet. And by the way, the cost of electric ferry, quite exorbitant. And the time to bring it into commission, quite lengthy. And the people will still suffer through all that time. So we're going to pay more money. It's going to take longer. Let's address the issue, and then let's bring a plan to work towards it. But thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity.
Alex.
I've got a couple questions on behavioral health and homelessness and housing. So, on behavioral health, as you probably know, in 2018, Western State Hospital lost its certification from the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare and Medicaid. At the time, I think it was going to cost the state $53 million. A lot of investments been made into that facility that was supposed to transform the state's healthcare system or mental health care system by 2023. 2023 was also the same year that 22 counties filed a lawsuit against DCHS for failing to provide adequate competency evaluations for those defendants who were found incompetent to stand trial. So I just wanted to get your sense of, if you're in the governor's mansion, what are you going to do differently, or how are you going to administer Western State?
Oh my goodness, thank you. So that is, I don't want to say it is my wheelhouse, but as a behavioral scientist, I have some insight to that. And thank you for bringing up also that we lost that federal money. And that was the amount of money. It was a significant amount of money because we failed to meet those federal standards. That's a lot of money to lose when we are already short. We don't have the infrastructure. I think between Western State and Eastern State, and then we just procured another facility just in South King County from a private institution at a good deal. So I would approximate 1,250 beds in total that we have for our mental health infrastructure. And we have two statutes that covers this. Again, you can break it down. One would be the terminology nowadays within the last few years is forensic mental health. And that's mostly what it's for the criminally institutionalized is another way of saying it. And then the other will be family would institutionalize, or the court would deem, but not with the criminal implications. So two different statutes. And then the folks who are non-criminal, they're being put into more nursing homes. And there's an issue because we don't have. But in Western states specifically, it was poorly ran. And the federal government gave them a long time to bring things into compliance. But they kept putting good money after bad policy and bad leadership. And it's not, I know that does sound critical. I don't like to be critical, I like to bring solutions. That's usually how I function because it's literally a victim behavior. It's after the fact. That was unnecessary. Under leadership that focuses on continuous improvement and solutions, you look, you assess, and you say, what is the issue? Instead of rushing to a law or rushing to a decision, you need leadership that thinks ripple effect like, and I've taught decision making for many years. What is the situation? What is the need? Sometimes you will spend a little bit more money here, but in the long term, you're going to save a lot more money. And I hope I'm still holding with you. They kept throwing money at Western State Hospital, and now they built this other wing, but it's incapable of sustaining what we have. Because at the same time, they were trying to remove other mental health institutions as well. Instead of partnering with private institutions, they were removing them. We should have partnered with private institutions instead of trying to be state-owned institutions. And so I think that was a gap. So back to your question, because sorry for jumping around, but I'm coming home. I think one of those solutions is a partnership to sustain, not just state-ran institutions, but to also grow our partnership with private institutions who often bring the resources and often bear the cost to offset taxpayer cost that we're bringing in. That is that literally is I think, a good way to go. The other thing is strategic planning. I know I'm a broken record in this. If we have not laid out a strategic plan to where our strategic outcomes are in terms of mental health, then laid out key performance indicators or milestones, measurable, where are we shooting? What are we shooting for? Where are we going, and how are we measuring it? That's what's missing. Because going back to Western State, where we got to a point where we lost that big money from the federal government, how is it that they kept saying, well, we're giving you another warning, and another warning, and another warning, and we kept failing, and then we lost the money? Key performance indicators would have given us milestones to get to where we needed to be before we lost the money.
Well, let me ask you this, it's sort of related to that, but do you support changing or lowering the threshold for civil commitment in Washington?
That's a very good question. Lowering the threshold for commitment. I'm going to pause on this because we do have a problem. So that's complex. I think the threshold works. The threshold works. To say we're going to lower the threshold for commitment, that could open up a lot where we can literally see, because right now, boy, I was thinking the emergency risk protection orders in terms of firearms, ERPO. People have a problem with that, where people can say, hey, that person's crazy, or that person has an issue, and then people are reporting on people. I think that the threshold is there. I think it's the resources and the infrastructure that is lacking. Did I answer your question?
So it's something you would keep the current threshold?
Yeah, I would.
So in homelessness...
But then reassess. So.
And if I could just interject, if you could answer the specific question that
Yeah.
they're asking, I appreciate that,
Oh.
the background and all that, but we have a lot of ground.
Okay, apologize.
Okay,
I'll
no
make it
problem.
quick. Thank you for that.
So on homelessness, there's a lot of figures and stats to show that a lot of the two bigger pipelines into homelessness come from the state, people exiting the state prison system, and people exiting the state foster care system. Given that those would be both under your control as governor, what would you do on both of those fronts to reduce homelessness, people entering homelessness in the state of Washington?
The problem with homelessness is mental health and addiction. The bulk of the homelessness problem is mental health and addiction. That being said, with no context, funneling from your example from institutions is different, which means rehabilitation. I am bringing a robust rehabilitation plan. I hope I'm not doing what you don't want me to do. We should stop releasing people out of institutions back to the same environment that got them into the institutions. I think we need to take advantage of the opportunity to bring trades and certifications so that they don't go back to the same environments. We should partner with our small business communities so that when they are released, that they have a positive direction to go in and to incorporate them into our society with a light ahead of them. Am I doing what you say you don't want me to do? Because I want to be quick. I'll stop. There it is.
In housing,
Yes.
the governor and legislature have hit $2.4 billion to reduce homelessness and address the state's growing housing shortage over the last couple of years. And yet, polls still show that 65% of people don't believe that any of that's going to actually improve the cost of housing. So I wanted to ask, for Washingtonians being asked to pay billions of dollars into housing and homelessness, what would you do to make sure that they're getting the most bang for their buck in terms of
Thank
housing?
you. Root cause analysis. You first have to identify what is the root cause analysis of the homelessness. And that is the people who are on the streets right now. That is it. So that is one thing to consider. Treatment first housing is something that I support, being very direct to you. The second thing, when we're talking about housing, we don't have enough units. It's a supply and demand. Why are we not partnering with developers to have them bear the cost of developing affordable housing and getting more units in the market, reducing restrictions on regulations and incentivizing more construction of affordable housing. Let them contract with the state to maintain low rates for those families who need affordable housing so that they can get in at a low rate. And you essentially have a contract with a developer that says, we're going to keep it at this cost because that contract is worth a lot of money. And a long-term contract with the state is a value asset. That's the value of having, I'm not going to say the context, business background. There it is.
That's sort of how it works now, right?
Well, it's not being utilized the way I would utilize it. And so you're building, they're not even building, they're much of the money that he's proposing on bringing in, it's going to nonprofit organizations. There's no accountability for how the money is being utilized. There's no measures and performance of the nonprofits. And where is the accountability in terms of treatment? Has anybody looked at the drug treatment infrastructure that we have right now? You put someone who's in that darkness of addiction and you put them in housing, does that stop them from going back out in the streets? It doesn't. And there's statistics that bear this out. They're still going back out in the streets. They're going back out in the streets to offend. They're going back out in the streets to get high. And some are just staying out there because they don't have the restrictions that they have within the housing units. I've been in them, and I've talked to the folks, and I lost my nephew last year. And I talked to him too. And I will tell you that when you lose someone that you love, you would rather almost have them in jail alive than dead on the streets. Compassion. I'll stop there because I'm taking up your time.
Well, speaking of addiction, Carlton.
The state of Washington is expected to see another record year of fentanyl deaths this year. And the state legislature has passed bills that would allow law enforcement and hospitals to detain children if they suspect the parents are guilty of neglect or abuse while on opioids. And some local jurisdictions have also made life-changing, saving measures to provide Narcan and other things to help people in public spaces if they are going through an overdose. As a governor, what would be your strategy to work toward prevention of opioid use?
100% it's awareness. I mean, it is awareness, but it's awareness and prevention, and they must go hand in hand. And so let me just say that the distribution of fentanyl and opioids must come at a higher cost. Class A felony, mandatory minimum, Class A felony. We must send and again, I want to be like the hanging high governor. It's not like that. But we must make sure that those who would deal in death, because that's exactly what we're talking about, this is an epidemic that we're seeing. The number one killer of our citizens from ages 18 to 45, fentanyl. So if you're profiting off the deaths of our children and our citizens, you're going to go to jail, and it's not going to be catch and release. So that's the prevention. But the other thing is make awareness from early ages all the way through of the severity of the addiction. It's so terrible. You just dabble. It's almost like you're done. It's like you touch it. That's how dangerous it is. And I know this. I've worked. Well, I can't say what I used to do. I'm counter narcoterrorism. Okay, there it is. I'll be quick. I'll stop there. So I know.
So if somebody has one pill and
No. Oh, please, then thank you for that opportunity. Thank you. No, and I just didn't want to take the time to be specific on this. Large quantities, and thank you, because you're gonna have someone suffering from addiction, and they're gonna sell a pill or two or three to make money to get high again, and that is different. They're not in control of what they're doing, and I know that to be true, and you cannot. They are not in control of what they're doing. And I'm saying that. The guy who's saying we're going to crack down on these guys, but they're not in control of what they're doing.
The sellers.
Yeah, the sellers. No. The people who are addicted to the drugs. Right. One pill or two, but the distributors you guys know what I'm trying to say. The narco dealers who are mass quantity dealers who intentionally organized crime. You know, we have cartels operating in Washington State. I can tell you who they are, not by name. The Sinaloa cartel, right? Eastern Washington, the Jalisco New Generation, right? The Beltran-Yeva cartel. When you work in a thing, real life, you know a thing. So, and I do when I did, so I'll stop there.
Okay. The issue of policing.
Yes.
The state legislature passed Initiative 2113 that scales back some of the restrictions on police pursuit to allow police officers to chase people if they have a reasonable suspicion that they have committed a crime. Some Democrats have said that will endanger lives of people to allow police to chase, especially in high traffic areas for small infractions. Do you agree with the legislature, or would you?
Yeah, so that's been changed. Now legislation has reinstated police pursuit. And within a matter of days, it'll go back to how it was, reasonable suspicion. But I know the trail.
You support that?
Yes, I do support enforcing the law and police pursuit, 100%.
Okay. And what about the issue of qualified immunity? The state has tried to pass that 3 times, and it's never gotten much traction. Colorado and New Mexico has done that. What are your thoughts on qualified immunity for police officers?
There's 2 things, and it'll be a long conversation. I'm going to cut it short because I'm under orders and I'm married. So it's a dangerous, it's a cutting edge. You're dancing in a razor blade. So let me get to it. We must protect our police officer, those who put on the badge and the gun to protect and to serve. But there is never an instance we're going to protect unlawful and wrongful compromising of a person using their authority to abuse the civil rights of a citizen. That'll never be tolerated under my administration, ever. And protection of union representation or anything else to say an officer who wrongly, clearly discharged their duties and abusing the federal civil rights of a citizen, no. Wrong is wrong. But at the same time, you cannot have a cloud where an officer is guilty until proven innocent. So that is why there is that balance that we must have, that we must partner our law enforcement with communities, that we must have communities engaged with law enforcement. We build the trust, but we bring accountability to our law enforcement officers. And I think our society is going in a positive way. I've been with a lot of our law enforcement leadership, and they're moving in a very positive direction. I think we have to continue to move in a positive direction, but we're not going to be blind, and we're not going to tolerate abuse of authority ever.
Okay, so do you think officers should be held civilly liable individually for going outside of the policy of the department, harming someone, killing someone?
I think that's definitely, if you blatantly exceed, then an officer can be held accountable. But there must be a threshold that you must reach to say that officer clearly exceeded that threshold and abused their authority. But it must be reached. And again, we have to have a discussion on this because it's not a simple, well, they did this, and so now we're going to ruin their families and do this. But yeah, I think I'm very clear on this. We're not going to allow people to abuse people's civil rights at all. Not going to happen.
Thank you. Melissa?
Yeah, let's return to the initiatives for a minute. On the questionnaire, you said that you support Initiative 2109, which would repeal the capital gains tax. Can you elaborate a little bit on what brought you to that position, and in a search for a less regressive taxing system, one with more parity perhaps or equity, what do you suggest instead, or do you have a plan for something instead?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, when we look at capital gains taxes or similar taxes, our Constitution in Washington State says we're not supposed to have an income tax. Capital gains tax, as was presented, was an income tax, and that's what that Superior Court judge stated when it reached that level and was stopped. and then it was brought to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says because we call it a capital gains tax or an excise tax, that it's not, but it is, because it aligns with the nexus of the IRS. I'm going to be quick on this. I think most people who find themselves falling into that realm are people who have produced and have earned that money, and I think it sends a bad signal that we're going to punish people who are earners and producers. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to money that the state needs to fund programs. I think that's what it comes down to. And what I would propose as governor, and what I'm going to do is on day one, I'm going to call for a statewide audit of all state programs and all state offices. And that's simply aligning with what I do or used to do. And that's to assess and improve performance of government. So we're more streamlined, we're more efficient, we operate more cleanly, more effectively, more efficiently, and more costly. Because I think there is waste out there, a lot of waste, billions of dollars in waste. That would be what we should be shooting for, so that we're not doubling our budget in 10 years. I think there's money there that we can fund our programs so that we don't have to have this. That's why that assessment. Let's get a handle on what we have. Do we have what we need? And so it may not be an issue, if that makes any sense at all. Thank you.
No, it does, thank you. And on a sort of related note, you also said that you support Initiative 2124, which would allow people to opt out of what is now a mandated long-term care tax.
Yes.
On payroll.
Yeah.
There is a need, though, for people to plan for long-term care. $36,000, which this supposedly, would give folks, is not enough. The need is great for people to have care, in their as we all live longer. But if people opt out of the program, it cannot survive. Therefore, what do you suggest? Do you suggest an alternative? Do you think the whole thing is flawed? Where are you with that?
It is, and thank you. It goes back to our discussion earlier when we were talking about cleaning this because it was done wrong. Because a program, if you opt out, that tells you right there that the program's done. You opt out and the program dies, that means the program was wrong. We need to look at this because if there's a need for our citizens, well, this goes back to awareness. Financial literacy is something, I know I'm digressing a little bit, but let's just go there and it's worth the time. There are communities. I never learned financial literacy when I was growing up. My mother was too busy trying to put food on the table, and she worked hard. We need financial literacy starting off very early in life, and not everybody gets that. A lot of that is handed down. A lot of that is taught. Why not start in school at a very early age? So let's bring that, and let's help educate people to start saving early so we don't get there. But in the meantime, let's assess what our needs are of our citizens, because some of our citizens are going to need help. There's just so much to say to this. So again, respecting your time, I acknowledge that we need to have a discussion on this, but that CARES Act, as you understand, it's not enough money. If you step out of it for a period of time, you lose it. If you leave the state and then come back, it's gone, you start over. It's insufficient, it's inefficient, and it doesn't work. It was, with respect, a bad plan. So that's why I support, but let's have that discussion and see if we can bring something better that people want to be a part of. And I think if it's a good one, people will want to be a part of it. But we need to try to bring something that citizens won't have to depend on things like that. I am really about lifting people out of poverty and despair. I really am. It's a big thing for me. It's probably my final statement. I'm kidding, it's not, but
Can I step in for a second?
Sure, of course.
So you've talked several times about solving things by assessing them and improving them.
yes, sir.
But you haven't talked yet about where you have done that, how long, and what the results are. So it would help us to get an understanding of what that experience is for you.
I would like to, but I'm not sure if we have the time because I was told. Oh, good. So I am not a clinician. So when I say thank you, when I say behavioral sciences, that's the context I wanted to give, and I appreciate that. With the United States Department of Energy, I was a GS 14 out of 15. I was a federal director of organizational development. I'm Lean and Six Sigma certified. I'm at a doctoral level, human performance technology certified. That's what I do. And what it is value stream mapping. You take anything that you do in terms of production, in terms of policy, performance of anything, and I know specifically how to map out every step in doing it to do it better. We can do it from a Six Sigma. In measurement, Six Sigma is near perfection. And mapping that out, Lean is removing waste. So I hope this helps a little bit. I've done this in hospitals, urban and general. I've done it with universities. I've done it with educational service districts. I've done it with aerospace corporations. A lot of other.
I hope you haven't been helping Boeing.
I know. Well, another aerospace organization, equal to the size, without giving away their names. But I appreciate you asking me that. I just don't want to take the time, but I really do.
Well, it does. I think it does help when we're in the receiving end of of knowing what you know what some of the ordinary. You named one organization.
Yeah.
Is there a couple others you could name?
Oh gosh. So I'm trying to think. We said education. We said aerospace. I've consulted for growers. When you understand the technology, I'm a PHR, Professional in Human Resources. So we have over 125,000 state employees. Labor relations. I'm a nationally trained mediator. So much. So I'm a believer, just very quickly, I'm applying for a job. I made a comment about politics, and I did this. Please read into this. I'm applying for a job. We are the panelist to hire me. I only want to go to work to make things better. The only way to make things better is to have an objective assessment of where we're at and then bring solutions based on those findings.
No, I think you've been very articulate. I think we all get that, but it's still and maybe it's all confidential, but you know, if there's a university or a police department or somebody like that where you can give us a specific name and an example of, you know, this is what I did.
I worked for Washington State University, and that's actually on my resume, and that's on the website. So if Kirk Schultz wants to tell you what I did for his university, he can. I don't give out my clients' information because in this day and age, politics is not nice, and they're already trying to lynch me in the streets. So there's some specificity out of respect for you. There's a lot on my website. Aerospace, you can drill it down to the largest aerospace corporations in America and just go to the top 3. And one of them, if they want to tell you Semi-Bird, they should know who I am. What else? I'm being respectful, but I don't.
No, that's
Thank you.
good.
I'll give you one more, just at Hanford. I retired from the United States Department of Energy. I consulted all of the prime contractors for Hanford, all of them. National laboratories. I've consulted almost all of them.
Good. That's very helpful.
Thank you. That was out of respect for you all, not for an endorsement or anything. And in truth, by the way, this sounds very arrogant. Endorsements, this is terrible to say. People out there matters a lot to me, and I appreciate. And I don't want to sound arrogant. But I just want you to know, I don't pander to get something. This is a calling to serve. I did that for respect, as one person to another, and nothing else.
Josh.
So yeah, we've made it this far. We haven't talked about the COVID-19 pandemic, and in one of your previous roles as in public service directly with Richland School District. I'm wondering if you can talk about how during really around the height of the pandemic, you made a decision, and I want to just hear from you about this decision to make masks optional when we were in a time where Governor Inslee had required them and the state was under those orders. Also, there were some allegations of some Open Public Meetings Act violations.
Yes.
And so those are obviously something that is alarming to our board about the transparency of what your governorship would be.
Yes.
So can you talk about both the mask mandates and Open Meetings Acts? And
100%, you guys, and I really do appreciate this. So let me get to it. Time. So the vote and my motion, and the motion was for choice, and this was at a time where Governor Inslee said that the nexus for his decision was hospitalization rates, and verify everything I'm saying just for credibility, and then hold me accountable, please, afterwards. So I went to the health district director, and it was myself, the superintendent, and an opposing board member before my motion. And the director of the health district of Benton County said we must also consider the mental health of our children and what's happening, knowing that we have the highest suicide rate of children, anxiety, depression, etc. Taking all that lost learning and everything else into consideration, I thought that giving choice to those parents was the equitable thing to do. And I did. She also did said, based on where we are in the trajectory of Omicron variants, and based on the reports of the University of Washington, I looked at it all. I'm a geek. I can speak social, maybe on spectrum, but I'm a geek. All the evidence said we were in a good place for my county. We made the decision on that. Let's talk about Open Public Meetings Act. There were a couple allegations on that, by the way, so I'm gonna bring up both. One was that the 3 school board directors conspired, which would have been a violation because only 2 can talk. Well, first, during the Superior Court discussions, they said, we did. Then the judge looked at the evidence and then came back and said, well, actually, based on the evidence, they didn't. Director Byrd evidently did not talk to Director Byrd. There was 2 Byrds, meaning I didn't. And she saw the proof, but missed it the first time around. And she dismissed that OPMA charge. That's on the record. So that goes away. Then there was the other OPMA, which specifically said that the agenda for a special meeting did not specifically or significantly or did not clearly say that we were going to take an action. Under new business, on our agenda, it said Resolution 949, the number could be wrong, local control. In my mind, local control, bringing forth a motion at my level, at our level, to get choice is local control. And the local control in the resolution was regarding COVID-19. So that's why I'm going to bring a comparative on this so that you know I'm not spinning words. In a year and a half prior, another special meeting, the opposing school board directors who said during this meeting, you're wrong, you can't do this, etc., and worked with the recallers to recall us. The same people, the major one, the president, they had on new business COVID-19 discussion, and they shut down our schools. Are you tracking with me? They took a vote to shut down our schools. Same situation, no number, no nothing, just COVID-19 discussion. They were only going to discuss. No one said anything, no one did anything. But for us, we were sued and we were recalled because of our vote. I'm not trying to defend it, I'm just to speak to COVID, to speak to OPMA. First OPMA, dismiss. Arguably frivolous, arbitrary, but it was dismissed. The other one, comparative analysis, they're saying that we should have said but our attorney argued that there's no requirement to go specifically say, we're going to take a vote on this specifically. And in fact, precedent had been set a year and a half before where they did not do it.
I see. I guess the biggest thing for me is the question around the transparency of if you were governor and if you believe in the Open Public Meetings Act.
Oh, 100%. And that's the point I'm trying to make. 100%. If in alignment with the rules of the Open Public Meeting Act, we didn't violate them. In fact, we were more specific. We literally said resolution with the number, and the resolution was there, which identified that this was about local control and local control relative to. In my mind, the action was, and I think in the mind of the other two school board directors, we were upfront about it. We just didn't say we were going to take a vote. But here's more information. Gosh, I have to see if I can say this because it was in an executive meeting, so I can't say that because then I would be in trouble.
But going forward.
Yes.
Going forward.
100%. I support the rules. I support the laws laying out in OPMA 100%. Yeah, we thought we were. So transparency is a big deal. I'm actually, as governor, I'm going to have a transparency website. You're going to see a lot. I will actually be proposing legislation. I'll be going in with legislation to propose, and I can do that under Article 3. And I'm going to be sending it out to our citizens first. I'm going to actually have a governor's podcast, which seems different, so that I can communicate directly with our citizens and so that they can submit questions to the governor. So there's a lot of things I'm going to do in the essence of transparency. And that assessment that I said I'm going to do, the results go on a website. I'm going to have a continuous improvement website for the Office of Governor. So all findings will be public to the public. So.
Okay, and just lastly, I know it came to light recently, there was, you have a misdemeanor
Yes.
conviction from
Yes.
the 90s, I believe.
1993.
93, using the name of and social security number of your father.
I flat out lied in a credit application using my father's credit information. It was wrong.
And I wanted to make sure that we asked you, what do you want people to know in your bid to be governor about those things, about
Yeah.
what happened in the past?
Yeah, don't break the law. I was wrong. I make no excuse about it 31 years ago. Yeah, if I can go back in time, I wouldn't do that. I kind of spoke and hinted about that earlier in our conversation about family. And there was a trigger to that. Again, I just say no excuse. I was wrong. I was guilty, everything. But I spoke earlier about families and strength. Having a father in a home makes a difference. I was a very bitter child, and I carried that through my life, and I'm not sure how other people are, but that was me. Then, I'm also a spiritual person, very spiritual. And I've grown in my faith. And then I was gifted my wife in 1997, June. And everything changed fast forward. What I want people to know is simply this. Who I was then in the timeline is not who I am now. When you hear me speak about addiction, not me, ever. My father was an alcoholic and he was abusive. Doesn't make an excuse for things I've done, but there are people who are affected by things like that. Some of us call it compassion and empathy. I guess I can't expect that as someone running for governor, nor do I ask for it. I have that from other means, and that's the most means that I could ever want. But when I met my wife, my life changed. I don't mind taking the arrows. I don't mind the public lynching. I don't mind being slandered and vilified and burned. I don't mind. But for everyone else, we don't cast aside people. When I speak about rehabilitation of our prison system, of our social justice system, of our criminal justice system, there's a lot of people out there who feel that they don't belong, that they've been labeled, that they are dead to the world and they have no place. Well, I have lived the American dream. I am not only not that person, that high school dropout, that kid born without civil rights. I'm no one's victim. No one's victim. But I want everybody to see, everyone to see, yes, I'll get a hot air balloon misdemeanor and put my face on it for everyone because I will take that. But as governor, everyone has a home in Washington State. Come home. You'll be loved, you'll be respected, you make yourself. Tara Simmons, state representative. Look what she did. That woman's a role model. She may not be within a party that I align with, and I'll just say this, I've hinted to it. I'm not a fan of party systems. I'm not a fan of party politics. And I don't like the fact that you have to choose a party to run for an office. I said that, and I mean that. our solution should be what's best for citizens based on how we feel and how we think. It should not be about party. But she changed her life. She's a lawyer, she's a state representative, and you look at where she was and what she did with her life, she's a role model. I don't ask anybody to look at me. They can go ahead and burn me until I get elected, that's fine.
So we're coming to the end
Yeah.
of your time, and I want to give you your chance, and I appreciate you sharing some of
Yeah.
that insight about your youth. But we're asking all the candidates this about this, and who won the presidency in 2020, and who are you going to vote for president?
Oh, well, President Biden won the presidency for 2020. I mean, well, he's the president.
Right.
The last time I checked, he's in the White House. So this discussion about stuff like that, anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that, but we should stop this stuff. I mean, we shouldn't have to have these discussions. And there may be Republicans or whomever who talk about this. Stop. If something's broken, you have a problem with the election system, let's fix it. I'm writing an election integrity bill. I'm writing it, and I'm going to propose it, and I'm going to put it to the citizens before it goes to the legislature.
Okay. So who are you voting for president?
I'm going to vote for President Trump.
Okay. All right, and then why don't you take a few minutes to if there's anything that you think, well, I can't believe you didn't ask me this, any parting thoughts you'd like to just sum up?
I'm going to do 15 seconds on President Trump's statement. I don't agree with his communication style. I don't agree with his leadership style. It's policy. I'm unhappy with what's been happening over the last several years in terms of our economy, our border security. That's what the vote is about. Compare and contrast between policies of the past, and we have two choices now. I want to make clear on that. Most of my closing statement would have been about what I said about our citizens and not forgetting people who have been marginalized and forgotten. Dr. King's dream is not finished. I intend on finishing it. Good paying jobs, raising people up from poverty and despair. I have an opportunity. I think we need to unite. I think we need to stop playing politics. We need to stop label lynching each other. I think we need to come together and unify. Our color does not determine our outcome in life. Tuskegee Airmen, George Washington Carver, Martin Luther King Jr., I can go on and on and on. I've had role models in my entire life. My mother, one of the greatest role models I've ever had. Let's bring families together. Let's lift families up. I'm different maybe. And I'll stop there because I want to respect your time, and you gave me grace. But I'm not a fan of politics. I was never going to be in politics, ever. It was not on my radar. But I hope people look at who I am and understand that I'm not running for a position to hold for a political party. That would be shameful with respect to other people. I'm applying for a job to go to work, to give back to the state that I was raised in. Plain and simple. Look at my resume, have faith in each other, have faith that there is better days ahead for our state. And let's bring back our Emerald City. This is the most beautiful state in the Union. We're a port city full of beautiful culture. Beautiful culture. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, everybody. And thank you for your kindness.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate your time.
Guys.
as well.
Absolutely.
So-
Sorry I was late. Gosh. All right.